So let's ask us.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. How about you?
You okay? I've been in that bucket. There you go.
I just don't want to fall in there.
Yeah.
We're back to these low seats. Here we go. Let's see what happens.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Do you want water, Takas? Try and get started, and so we can have a good conversation tonight. We will begin with just introductions of everybody here at the table, and we'll engage. I know we'll have just individuals from our audience engage at different points throughout our conversation, but I'm Matt DeFranti, Chair of the Board this year, and I will ask if each board member, and then we can go around to Nick, and we'll come back this way around. So go ahead, Vice Chair.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maureen Coffey, Vice Chair of the Arlington County Board.
Good evening, everyone. Julius D. J.D. Spain Sr., Junior Member of the County Board.
Go ahead, Nick.
Nick Giacobbe, I'm the president of the Civic Federation.
Thank you. Great, that works.
I'm Alan Gadgeter.
Oh, you gotta.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, I'm Alan Gadgeter. I'm a board member of the Civic Federation.
Thank you, Alan.
Hi, I'm Michael McMenamin. I guess I'm former president of the Civic Federation, and then I'm also a board member and also head of the Public Safety Subcommittee on Public Safety.
Great. Takas.
Tax Carantonis, happy Mardi Gras. And I'm a colleague of
Everybody.
Susan and Matt and Maureen and
Thank you.
And I'm Susan Cunningham, also county board member.
Great. Just so that everybody gets a chance, we all do have name tags. We will, I'll turn it over in just a minute to you, Nick. And if we need last names, then that's a different conversation. But let's just go ahead and have, and that goes for us as board members. Feel free to use at least my first name. I'm comfortable with it. We will divide our conversation into three components tonight. One will be on the economic safety net. A second, and the federal impact, human services, public safety, and then we'll have a session on planning and zoning with a lot of subtopics. And then we will have a session on connecting with local government, open governance, transparency, et cetera. But what we thought we'd do this year is really not have much of a preamble on the county board side and really give it to you all to engage. I'm going to ask everyone's forgiveness with an additional shift, and I think I've stayed under 3 minutes. But this timer is 3 minutes. I find the best conversations have lots of exchanges rather than monologues by me. My wife tends to agree with that. And certainly I tend to agree with that in the cases of my daughter and son. So I will now send it to you, Nick, and
Great.
we'll try to keep our comments in exchange so we have a good conversation. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, board members. Really appreciate this time to have this work session. Civic Federation, for the past 120 years, since 1916, has been a forum for dialogue, and we continue to be that way. Everyone is welcome. Our only requirement is that everyone is civil and everyone respect one another during the course of those conversations. So as we were thinking about what kinds of things we wanted to get into with the county board this year, we thought we wanted to get away from the normal things that we're always talking about, form of government, planning, zoning, but we wanted to get into some other things because we're kind of at an existential point right now in the country. We're in the change. There's lots of change going on. The old world order is crumbling quickly. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with that and how we move forward. So that's the reason we're starting out with the economic and the social safety nets, which is really important. And one of the things that the county needs to pick up a lot more than in the past because the federal government just isn't there to support them as much anymore. We'll talk a little bit about planning and zoning, and one of the keys there is predictability. And it's predictability not only for the developers, but predictability for the citizens and the neighbors. And trying to understand, as we're in this constantly changing world, how is it that everyone engages, and what are the rules, and what are the rules of engagement? And then finally, something that's really important to us, which is connecting with the local government. That's one of the roles that we see CivFed helping out with, as well as the civic associations across the county. And how can we make sure that the citizens engage with the county and the county engages with the citizens? And we're happy to be helpful on that because we see that as a very important role, particularly as we're celebrating the 250th year of democracy in the United States. That democratic connection is absolutely critical. So that's kind of the topic set that we'd like to take on tonight. So with that, I'm going to begin with our first panel. I have two esteemed former presidents of the Civic Federation, and I'll turn it over to Alan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Alan.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk briefly about the federal budget cuts. In the fiscal year 24 analysis of federal funding that was part of the 25 or 26 budget, I forget which, there were about $90 million identified that was passed through from the federal government. I would guess it's more in the current fiscal year. One can assume, given the current political conditions and changes over across the river, that a significant portion of that will not be available in the coming fiscal year. One could assume that a good bit of that is not going to be available in the coming fiscal year, or it will change completely. And in addition, on top of that, there will also be, one would assume, changes in what's coming in from the state. So, I wanted to talk about what potential plans are in place to identify, one, where those cuts could be, given what we've already heard from both governments. What mitigating strategies could there be to address or offset those cuts by some other revenue mechanism? And Mike will talk more about the fiscal year 27 budget. And then the other thing is, we've seen over the years, and I personally am very much in favor of this. In the last 5 years, I think the staffing at DHS has increased by over 100 people, and consequent, funding associated with that too. Is there a concern that, one, that rate is either rather, too fast, and can it be sustained, or will that have to be pulled back in terms of the additional positions that at least were created, if not actually filled, over the last few years? So that's what I would like to talk about.
Great. What I suggest is that we'll give you plenty of time, Mike, but we have tried to discipline ourselves towards brevity and towards having a couple of board members start this piece of the conversation, while the rest of us will seek to be succinct as we add. And so I think we've got Maureen and JD to help lead us, and we can each take those questions, but what I heard is what is coming in terms of potential cuts this year, what are the offsets that might be there, and DHS staffing. Those are the big buckets I heard. Over to you, Maureen.
Yeah, so I think there is some good news with the appropriations package that was passed within the last month, which is primarily that HUD-funded Section 8 without the massive cuts that we were afraid of. And so the $90 million that had been identified in a previous budget presentation, between 20 and 30 million of that was HUD Section 8 housing vouchers just by itself. And so that was our biggest direct exposure, especially on the economic social safety net side. And we are very glad to see that has moved forward. I think when we're talking about the reconciliation bill, the two largest cost increases there, because the way that Republicans managed to cut the federal budget was basically by cost shifting onto state and local governments. And so what you're seeing is that in order to provide the same level of SNAP benefit administration in Virginia, the Commonwealth and localities are going to have to take on up to 25% of the administration cost. And then there's a sliding scale on the actual benefit cost based on the SNAP error rate for the states. Virginia is about average on our SNAP error rate. we would have to cut that in half to avoid the penalty that is put in by the reconciliation bill. And so we have one fiscal year, basically, to get our SNAP error rate as low as possible. I know that the Commonwealth is working really, really hard on that, but they are also planning in their budget to figure out how do they fund the kind of, let's call it a penalty for the benefit dollars. And so that's a huge cost. And then also at the Commonwealth level, funding for Medicaid and the work requirements and the systems that are now going to be required. We've never done work verification for our Medicaid expansion population. And now we are going to have to implement that alongside with, instead of annual verification, biannual verification. And so that's a huge amount of administrative work in addition to some of the costs of the program being shifted around. And so those are two of the biggest Commonwealth-wide exposure. That trickles down to us because SNAP, while state funded, is locally administered. And so we have a responsibility for those administration costs. And we will figure it out, I think is kind of the gist of it. It's gonna be part of the budget planning process. The last kind of large human services exposure I think we have is really around the homelessness funding from HUD, because they put out a notice of funding opportunity that had these new constraints that had never been seen before around what you can use for permanent supportive housing, which is, for folks who have disabilities and who need permanent supportive housing because of a actual condition that makes it hard for them to work. And so a bunch of states immediately sued over that. They pulled the language back, and to my knowledge, it still has not been reposted. And so no one knows what or when that is going to move forward, but we obviously very much depend upon our federal homelessness funding dollars. And so those are kind of, I think, some of the big buckets. The UASI, Urban Area Security Initiative money, which is our anti-terrorism dollars. The DC metro area had our UASI funds cut by about 90%. And so, yes, so that is a really, really big one. Our legislative team has been working in Richmond. Delegate, now Senator Elizabeth Bennett Parker, put in a budget amendment for us in order to try and get some Commonwealth one-year funds for the Northern Virginia region in order to plug some of those holes, because the UASI funds, they go for like the large-scale regional operation training kind of stuff, but it's also our regionally integrated computer-aided dispatch 911 and making sure that our radios have interoperability across different fire departments and different police departments. And it has really gone to some basic foundational functional things that we just can't not do. So we're working on planning for that, but hopefully the Commonwealth can also give us some support. And I'll pass over to my colleague JD now.
Thank you, Maureen.
Well, that's, sounds like the vice chair covered it all. No, so I'll just knock on a few things into the CivFed. Thank you for being here, Mr. President. You started out talking about the 120 some odd years of CivFed existence, and there's been lots of change. I'll try to kind of just talk briefly about some of the areas and kind of end up focusing a little bit on DHS and what we have going on. But first, let me kind of level set with some of our basic socioeconomic data so everyone who's probably watching really understands the time that we're in. When you talk about how do we deal with change, you often hear us talk about the social safety net, right? And ensuring that Arlingtonians that are here are not being displaced and that they have the basic essentials. You've heard some information about the impact of federal money not coming in. But let me tell you, we have around 24,000 people in Arlington as of 2025 that are at below the 30% AMI range. Now, just think about that for a second, right? If you go over to Capitol's arena or Capital One arena and think about that being jam-packed, that's how many folks we have here in Arlington right now who are considered extremely low income. And so when we see these rising costs, loss in wages, the demand for the safety net and the services that we need to provide from DHS are at our all-time high, especially when, funding from DHS, as we know, is not coming the way it need be. That being said, the question becomes, what is, Arlington going to do about it? And I think what you can see, what we've done, last year at the tune of about $350,000, we inserted some money into AFAC, right, to help in that regard. But that's just a drop in the bucket, right, when you think about the long-term effects. We're not even getting into the robust services that we have to provide as it relates to our immigration population, who, because of a lot of these new federal rules and regulations that are being implemented, have put up barriers, right, for them to access housing, rental assistance, all of those things in kind. So I think what we are committed to in working with the team is ensuring, despite these federal impacts, is from budget cycle to budget cycle, is figuring out ways to protect what people have earned here in Arlington. It's challenging. We cannot wait, I will be quite honest, on the federal government to come and save us. I think there's going to be some good bills coming forward out of this year's session, as you heard the vice chair talked about. But in the meantime, we're going to have to look internally. We have a budget cycle coming up, right? Thinking about, what are those critically important systems that we are going to have to stand up and keep in place. When you think about personnel at DHS, the organizational meeting in January, that was something I talked specifically about, that being DHS. I believe, quite honestly, we need more programs and more people, to be quite honest, but we're at a very tough time. So I have the utmost confidence in Anita Freeman and Michelle Cowan and our county manager in this upcoming budget cycle to make sure we do what's necessary, that we don't have people getting displaced, that we do what we can when it comes to housing vouchers and things alike. That's also going to be challenging. We're probably going to have to put caps on a lot of things, but we're ready for the moment. It's going to be challenging for all of us, but this is something that we're laser focused on. It may not be a very pointed reply right now because we have a budget cycle coming up and there's going to be some decisions that need to be made this year in a very tight budget year. But know that we're here and ready to go. As the liaison, quite honestly, when you think about economic development and the economy in its totality, it's not just about the federal aspect of it, right? We're also looking at our business market and working with AED and working with all of those stakeholders to ensure that we have the right type and the revenue coming into this county to do what's necessary. With that, I see the chair is kind of glazing at me, so I better slow down or just.
No, you're good. Both of you. Great, covered a lot, worthy. And
we have more to go.
Probably over 3 minutes. I'm going to try to be super succinct, and I'm going to cut myself off. I'm not one of the two leads. Couple of points. The figure that JD mentioned, the poverty line, has changed. When I was growing up, $25,000 for a family was different, but now it's $49,000 for the 24,000 people that would have fit. So that's for a family of 4 people. And we all might say that's plenty, but then if we ask ourselves in this room, it's more likely than not that most of us are not close to that income place. And so I just wanted to put a fine point on that. I wanted to recognize the county manager is here. Appreciate you being here, Mr. Schwartz. And then also here is David Barrera from our team, who's going to try and capture the places where we have follow-up. I would just conclude and take any edits from colleagues, mindful of our 25 to 30 minutes. It's actually the case in my belief, and correct me everyone if you want, not only is everything that Maureen said about housing choice vouchers and Section 8, that's protected. I think the number might be 92,000, but the number that I've been burned in my head is 92 million, had been 82 million. And not only are the 12 of the 13 federal bills that have passed is housing choice vouchers, but so is Title I. So almost all of the education, which is 20 million of that, also protected. It turns out, outside of the administration, there's bipartisan support for the same fiscal policies, however you judge them, good or bad, that have been occurring. So my view is, at this point for this fiscal year that ends September 30th of this coming year, with the exception of the Department of Homeland Security, we don't have big exposure there when we thought we would. That does not mean the 4 million in homeless funding. It is my belief that this board would want to step up there. And to be concrete, I believe it's fiscal conservatives who have, some of whom care quite a bit about homelessness, or at least some Christian conservatives who have stopped the different approach to homelessness that would have put at risk those 4 million at the federal level. So our exposure might not be big there, but it is big on a lot of other areas in terms of revenue and federal employees. We're seeing lower receipts on lots of issues. So that's, I think I still fit within the 3 minutes. Those are just the pieces that I wanted to add. I want to make sure there's time for Mike, you to ask all the questions you have, and I want to give opportunities should anyone want to add things that fit well within the 3 minutes so that we can be efficient. Yeah. So Alan, you may have follow-up, and I don't see colleagues' lights at the moment, but I'll give a full chance. First Alan, and then back to us. We'll finish it out, and we'll give you, Mike, the full chance to ask your questions.
I just had one follow-up question. What's the number for the UASC funding? Do you happen to know? Ballpark? The UASC funding?
Oh, 1 million.
1 million?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
for the region, 1 million down basically to 5 million for the DMV.
And what does that fund here in Arlington? You said the call center, among other things, or?
It's a bunch of, it's all of our interoperability, it's all of the practicing across the region, making sure that, if there is, this funding was put into place after 9/11 as part of the response and prevention to another future terrorist attack happening because, nothing like 9/11 had ever occurred before. No one knew how to operate, and it was all hands on deck from every public safety agency in the region. And so people learned a lot of things, and it required money to implement those things. And so it goes to a real wide variety of public safety initiatives, but also things like health preparedness. So like the Northern Virginia Emergency Response System is partly funded through it. Some of our hospitals receive funding for things like vaccines and PPE. So it's a really broad, emergency preparedness type of funding.
And I see a nod from Mr. Schwartz. To some degree, there's some specifics that we may not want to fully, but Maureen covered most of it. So any other questions? I think maybe unless you're good with it? Sure. And I think, just so I heard you right, about 1 million in our budget, 5 million in the region. Is that correct?
What was left over by the federal the federal division of the UASC money, I believe we went from 95 million for the DMV region to 5 million for the DMV region that we are receiving from the federal government. And we are looking to get from the Commonwealth $1 million for Northern Virginia to replace, our portion of the $90 million that we're not getting.
Great. I just wanted to try and get a little sense on the exposure that we have. I care about Fairfax, but I only grew up there, so I care less about it than Arlington, to be quite honest.
And Mr. Schwartz should be sure to come, whack me in the back of the head if any of those facts are wrong.
Great. I think now to Mike, you.
Okay, folks, I want to thank you for letting me have the opportunity to talk a little bit about public safety. First off, I want to let you know that the chief and the sheriff and so forth have done a wonderful job in participation with us over at least more than the last 20 years with me and also at the Civic Federation. They've been a number of times, so I'd like to point that out. I guess fundamentally what we need to talk about in terms of, and really quickly, I know we're running out of time, is I know in FY 2026 that we're trying to address the FTE issue with the police, raise the salaries and so forth to $90,000, and those staffing levels need to be fixed. There's 70 vacancies as of last year. I don't know what they are today, but I imagine they still are substantial. And it's important that we have raised those salaries, and also I need to gain an understanding. It was one of the central questions that we had when I was on FAC about this, is where do we stand in terms of training these folks up, and then we'll pay them, and then we'll lose them to the federal government or another county or someplace else, which happens a great deal, unfortunately. And then when we shift over and look, and then also the overtime issue, there's lots of overtime that's put in that puts a drain on the budget and so forth. And then we shift over to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office has got a number of issues today dealing with staffing, and also the fact that their salaries for their FTEs haven't gone up. I think they have 44 vacancies at the present time, and they're still around I think it's $65,000 or $68,000 a year. And they would like to probably see their salaries raised to the $90,000 threshold, because it's hard to get those people to come and work, and especially with the federal government, again, giving bonuses with ICE and then also with the park police and so forth today. It's a competitive market to find good people to be public servants. So I think that's something that we need to think about. And then also, it's been for years, and I've toured the jail, and I've met with the sheriffs, the last couple sheriffs many times, and I know it's an interesting place because it's sort of like a hospital, a restaurant, an institution, drug addiction problems and so forth, and we don't have enough folks over at the jail and so forth to do the job that needs to be done, and it requires a great deal of overtime there, and we need to hire more employees at the jail too. And like the sheriff has also often told me, if we have to take somebody to the hospital, the two employees have to go with the person to the hospital in order to guard them. So there's a lot of manpower has to be done with the sheriff's office, and so all these things cost money, and all these things are very important. And the other piece of all this, and then I don't know if we want to address this, but I don't know if we have time, is what we're looking at coming forward. I know that we talked in the spring last year with Mark about the unemployment going up in the county. Where does revenue derive from? Where do we have an economic officer? We've got problems with Amazon today. Not hitting their hiring threshold like they were supposed to. We have apartments that, if we're going to tax renters and so forth, there are a lot of vacancies in the county, and the overall general welfare of the folks in the county that we have to look at today in terms of if the tax increases and so forth were put forward to do this. So I think we'd have to think creatively about how we're going to deal with the budget issues for public safety and other issues that are out there today, which is a very difficult task, and also the revenue base that we have today.
Great. Mike, you put a lot into those comments and really appreciate it. I'm going to see if JD would go first.
Yep.
The only thing before we do, I just want to say one sentence. The reason we didn't get specific on the DHS employees is we haven't yet been briefed on our upcoming budget. So the sticky details of that, and I think it is fair to say increases in any full-time employees this year, highly unlikely. There may be a few sectors, but very, very few that we would have increases in numbers of full-time employees. It could be in DHS, but we didn't get specific on answering that part of your question, Alan, because we don't know yet, and we're going to do that work. So JD, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I see the hourglass is turned upside down. So this is, Mike, thank you for those questions under the umbrella of public safety. And what I'll take on talking a little bit about FTEs, even though you brought up overtime, training, sheriff salaries, jails projected budget down the road. I think what you saw in this past year was a very deliberate act on the part of the county board to take on a critical issue to the police department as it relates to recruiting and retention. And so through a level of collective bargaining, right, we now have a police department that is one of the highest, if not the highest in the region. To get down into the weeds with training and ensuring that professional development and all of that is up to par, I think that the chief and all the critical stakeholders have put it before us in making sure that once we invest in these folks, that they stay, right? But salary, as we all know, is just one aspect of bringing on a good employee, right? There's housing, there's all these other aspects of it. So we're just charting this course. I think in probably 6 or 7 months, maybe a year, we'll be able to look back and see that analysis and how this injection, right, of the $90,000 has benefited. We're in a very competitive market when it comes to law enforcement. We can't stop anyone from going to Amazon or you name a place or the federal government, but we hope to slow it down. And what I'm hearing, quite honestly, in the region is that there are other areas now that are looking to try to keep up, to get up here with Arlington to be more competitive. So it's challenging. The overtime issue, I won't say much about that, but just know that our auditing team will be looking and is carefully at some of the overtime that we have been spending in our budgets over the past few years, not just the police department, because it's well known that we've been spending a lot of money there, right? I think there's perhaps ways to be more efficient, but we're going to do some auditing and we're going to look at that and analyze that on the backside. And lastly, I will say this, and instead of taking up all my time covering these subjects, I concur. The sheriff's department, and I happened to go over there about a month ago and did a 4-hour shift with one of the deputies. It's hard work. A lot of folks have asked for pay parity, right? We're not sure if we're there yet on that, but I'll tell you what, that work is hard and not everyone can do it. So we're in conversations with the sheriff, we're our DMF team, and others are looking at ways that perhaps how we can move the needle, right? And with this upcoming budget cycle, I think the jury's still out. But I will tell you that we need to do more, we need to do better. I think in helping the sheriff's department and the deputies, they too have a recruiting and retention issue over there. And to your part about inmates, quite honestly, is not just a jail, it's a detention facility. It's like a quasi-medical facility going on over there, right? So we've invested and went into, we're taking on that medical providing service right now. It's a lot going on there. And we're up for the task as well. And I think you're going to see some changes here in the short term as we look to help out not just the sheriff, but the deputies as well.
Perfect timing for conclusion because the sand is coming down. Maureen, we are right at time for the whole deal, but we started a little late. We'll stay on time. Go for it.
I'll try and address some of the more macroeconomic factors because I think that is going to be one of the most important things. We are obviously beholden to the reality of our region. The last year, there is no one who would deny that it's been a really hard time to be a worker in the DMV area. I just anecdotally, right, I was hiring for a board aide. We got all the applications. You would not believe some of the qualifications of people applying to work as an aide because you can tell, from their resume, they lost their job in April of last year. And they are still looking. We all know people who have applied to, 100+ jobs and not even really gotten interviews. And that's kind of the reality where we're at right now. And so we do have basically double the unemployment rate now that we had a year and a half ago. Part of that is because we had an exceptionally low unemployment rate at that time. But we are, we are very focused on this. There's also only so much that we can do from the public sector standpoint, especially as a local government. We're not stimulating business ourselves necessarily. And I think, the office to residential conversion program that we passed with an accelerated ordinance that allows these to go through the process much faster has been one of the best things. We've gotten more than 1 million square footage of vacant office space out of the office market and turned into, in the process of being turned into residential just in the last 6 months, basically July to now, more than 1 million square feet. And so, when you look at that, when you look at where real estate assessments came in, office is down 19%. Apartments are up 6.5%. And traditional residential, so non-apartment residential, is up about the rate of inflation, so like 3%. So, there are parts of our economy locally even that are still doing really well. And there are parts that are not, and there is kind of this transition period that we're in where it's just figuring out what works, and no one has that recipe right now. We've never been here before, but I'm very confident as far as our economic development team that JD gets to work with a lot more closely. But I'm very confident in the team, and I think that they are, leaving no stone unturned here, trying to just figure out what comes next, and it's one step at a time.
Great, thank you. We covered most. I think the unemployment rate is now 3.2%. When I was growing up in economics courses in college, They didn't think that that was healthy. They thought it had to be up at 5% for normal transition. There is problems. It's twice what it used to be. I would say, just briefly, there was a Wall Street Journal on the Amazon pieces. We do think the instance of those vacancies and layoffs are going to be in Seattle and elsewhere. I think that structural piece of our economy is in decent shape. We have the Virginia Hospital Center expansion, which is a key piece to addressing the sheriffs. And then I think it's just worth saying a sentence or perhaps two on the decisions that we have already made. We have already basically indicated that we are investing $5 million in ongoing in our police and fire, and that will be we will feel that pain because that will mean for a very difficult budget. That is a new thing that is related to the vacancies that you identified and the holdovers. I am sure we will hear from folks who say that's concerning. The sheriff's office does not have collective bargaining, and that's a different piece, but it is still felt by us even as we can't do it. So I just feel like it may be an uncomfortable truth that we all have to deal with, but it is likely to put us in a space where it's very difficult to make our budget fit together, but we think it's the right thing to do. So I want to give a chance for Mike to respond, and then maybe you can piece yours in. Go ahead, JD.
Mike, I'll just be quick. You talked about public safety, and I think I would be remiss if I did not, bring to the forefront. I tied to it a little bit earlier. The magnitude by which our immigrant population here in Arlington will require a level of confidentiality, but also access to social safety net programs in Arlington. And so that's something that we also, under the umbrella of economic safety net, right, and working with DHS, are also laser focused on. I stated earlier, we look in this room and we see who's here today, but we also got to understand who's not here. And part of our roles, right, is also ensuring through a very equitable way is that we leave no one behind in these conversations with public safety and the looming dark cloud, right, of aggressive tactics that are being used in communities across this nation. So that keeps us up at night. And so I just want to, bring that to the forefront of this conversation as we talk about public safety. You mentioned think creatively in your comments, and we're all doing that. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, JD. I appreciate you adding that. Go ahead, Mike.
And I appreciate it, and I thank you for answering my questions, and I know I was in a hurry. I just have one other question for you, I guess, is in terms of all this is, how are you folks dealing with this state? Because Northern Virginia has been the cash cow for the state for how many years, and how are you working with the delegation? There's a budget surplus in the state. There's been one for a while. There's also been, talk of raising taxes in the state. So I don't know, working with the delegation, if any funding, because those things have changed here in Northern Virginia. It's just a question I generally have.
No, I think it's a great question. Maureen, as liaison, Susan also wants to add something before we finish up this segment. I'm sure you could speak for a long time on that. We'll give you the mic to go for it.
Keep it short. We're working on it. I would say, again, back to kind of the federal reconciliation bill that passed last summer, the Commonwealth, while they may have had a surplus before, it is not, it's going to cover what we need to cover, and then we'll have a little bit more, and hopefully some of that will go to our schools. Hopefully some of that will go to our regional public safety initiative, and hopefully some of that will go to transportation, because we also have the Metro bill coming due, and some of the tax increases that are being discussed are a little bit more complicated, because with the sales tax adjustment, the real goal is to change what sales tax applies to, but lower the sales tax rate. So there are things like digital services that have never been included in sales tax before, but it would allow us to get rid of sales tax on things like, personal sanitary items. And I think grocery is also one where we could get rid of that if we make it apply to more things. And then it would also allow us to have a dedicated funding source for the Metro, which is ultimately the goal. And so it's been, I think, really discussed in not a helpful way, but it has a lot of benefits packed in there, and we'll see where that comes out. But we're working with the delegation. I think no one in Northern Virginia is unaware of the the need right now, and also the historic dynamics within Richmond do not set us up to easily ask for additional investment in places that have traditionally done very well for ourselves.
Great, thank you. Susan?
I would just wrap up because it didn't come up. Our own demographics continue to change as well. And so as we look both at this year and sort of the 5 and 10-year view of our budgets, we need to respond to the fact that our population is aging, and that changes our homelessness services, it changes our housing needs, and potentially changes our other programming and facilities needs in ways that have to come from somewhere. So just tagging that as something that's also on our minds.
Thank you, Susan. We will go on to the next topic with your understanding, and I really appreciate all of the consideration. We will continue the conversation individually and as we go forward. The next topic, as folks really appreciate it, don't rarely get applause in this room, but we'll take it. Next, we'll talk about planning and zoning, and just a big thank you, Alan and Mike, for your questions. And so I will be ready when you guys are seated and ready to kick it over to you guys. We do have a lot to cover in this area, and I will also seek to, we'll have on point a combination of Maureen and Susan, and then I'll pinch hit on a couple of the other items, but we have a few subtopics. Do we go straight to Nicole or to you, Nick?
Brian Hunter is our team lead, who knows a lot about planning as a long-term member of the Planning Commission.
He sure does.
Over to you, Brian.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, thanks so much. I'll just jump right in. Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
members of the board, thanks you so much for this conversation. You know, this morning, I just want a quick opening comment. This morning I was thinking about this meeting, and I was catching up on some reading, and there's this article in the Times about the current trajectory of the Washington Post right now by Carlos Lozada. This is a couple weeks ago. I'm a little behind on the reading, but I thought this was really interesting. He was talking about the principles that used to hang in the lobby of the Post, the 7 principles for journalism. And then when the Post moved, the principles were put into brass, but a little harder to read. And so he was writing, I thought this passage was really captured a lot of the spirit of planning and zoning that we've had in CivFed. It said, you know, Katharine Graham, the publisher who led the Post through the Pentagon Papers and Watergate, wrote that her father's 7 principles were the heart and soul of his convictions, but how to translate them into action was the challenge. That's the thing about principles. How do we take them down from the wall and put them in the business model, into the paper, and into the hands of readers, and make sure that we do so every day? I just really felt like that captured a lot of what the Planning and Zoning Committee and CivFed talks about in terms of we are in a state of transition on our principles in planning in Arlington County, it appears. What are the principles? Are they clear? Are they widely embraced? Where are we headed with our principles? What's the implementation? I think you're going to hear touches of these things in the questions that we have tonight, but I think the big picture is we have a lot to tackle, and we have a lot of community engagement and conversation to chart our course, which should be exciting and positive and visionary for the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Brian. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you. And I think that the question that I'll ask will parlay really well into that visionary topic. I just want to give you a heads up that we have a draft resolution that we'll be submitting to you with 4 different topics from the Transportation Committee for CivFed. It hasn't been passed, so I won't get into details, but they will cover Arlington's transportation future, Vision Zero, our VDOT relationship and corridor planning, as well as site plan principles. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll come to you later this year. Going off of what was just talked to, there are a lot of ideals and planning that the county has taken on in the last several decades, most recently with Plan Langston Boulevard, and there's a heavy reliance in some of these corridors on our relationship to VDOT and state planning efforts. So I guess the first question that I'd go into is how do we plan to see through with our plans and fund those plans in coordination with the state? And if we don't have a plan, how can we work with you to achieve those? because a lot of times they come to the community, even maybe more so than they come to you all. And so how can we be better symbiotic partners to achieve our shared visions there, not only for Langston, but other VDOT owned properties and maybe even site plans that are going on those corridors. The second is that we have some promises that we've made on other corridors like Columbia Pike on bus service expectations. I know that there's been funding that is going towards that, but I think there's been kind of an unclear timeline on implementation on some of those promises. So it'd be great to get, and that's like a very clear example of a time when we relied on VDOT and it was very unsuccessful for decades, and we took a chance to take over those, and there were capital costs to that, and we were able to make those changes. But some of those timelines were less clearly communicated, I think, to the public, and there was expectations set that maybe could be more clear moving forward. And then the third one is that many civic associations see their way for infrastructure improvement requests as through Vision Zero. You have a very good staff on your Vision Zero team. And for that reason, a lot of people see that as like their silver bullet into improvements. There is the new My Arlington app service request function that you all have launched. We've seen that a lot of those just get rejected with no back and forth. And so if there is an opportunity for a forum for civic associations for anything from like just mill and overlay to hawk signal implementation, to have a real conversation with our neighborhoods, that would be very helpful. So some of that's commentary and some of that's question.
Great. So I think from body language that we're going to go first to those three questions and then come back, if that's okay with colleagues. And
I've been talking a lot, but
on
that's
those
fine.
three buckets, there is one of the three that I might be able to help you out and phone a friend, but I'll let you go first.
Sure. Okay. So I think planning and working with VDOT is getting better. I think VDOT overall is getting better. The bar was not particularly high. But I think on Langston, for example, the STARS study, which is down towards the Roslyn end of the corridor, was a really huge opportunity for us, our transpo staff, to be working side by side with VDOT on things that we would do on our normal streets pretty quickly, but that requires more substantial coordination. And I think through that, we have developed more of a relationship. I don't know that I would say we are at the point of having like a true plan overall. I do know that we have a series of studies that are in the queue. Jackie has been very involved in discussion of some of those particular studies, but you know, I think it is on everyone's mind, and in the conversations I've had with our transportation staff in particular, I don't think anyone is being naive about the level of challenge that type of coordination poses to some of what we are trying to accomplish. So I think we are thinking about it and working on it. I don't know that we have a solution to that yet, and no one's jumping in safe. So
may I just respond and say that as someone that lives on Glebe and saw the STAR study on Glebe, I was really disappointed in the improvements that they recommended and the type of improvements that I would expect of Arlington County were not seen through in that STAR study. And so for that reason, I feel a little bit unhopeful about the Langston one. And so if there are ways for us to just think about what it means to take on some ownership of some of that financially would be helpful.
Great.
And we are thinking about that in partnership with Langston Boulevard Alliance. The conversation is ongoing about what that looks like. I don't know if we will pass along.
Sure.
But.
Just briefly on that, you know, Arl now covered what Mark said in your conversation about owning Langston Boulevard. I think there are different financial dynamics on Langston than there were on Columbia Pike. And I have to fess up to being a little late. We had a little bit of a preliminary conversation, in part because of your advocacy, Jackie, and the specific site plan involved in that small study that you're advocating for, and the capital improvement plan moment that we're in. I'll just sort of underscore that I think that the concerns are right. I'm not sure that the moment is right for us to try to respond to the Langston Boulevard Alliance and the broader community's desire for, at this moment, taking on Langston like we took on Columbia Pike. And I just want to be at least that it's a big cost-benefit analysis, and we have heard the advocacy on the specific site that is involved in the transportation study there. So I hope that's my fault in part for not sharing that. I think JD and I were in a conversation. I owe a summary of that preliminary conversation, but I'm not trying to make news in that I know that there's still the desire from the broader community, but I think that the smaller piece is where we should start at this moment.
I would just add that I hear the unhopefulness, and I've been through projects a decade or so ago that had some similar unhopefulness. I do think, and the manager may want to comment, but I do think our staff muscle memory and relationships have improved over that time period. And so I think you'll see it in like the regional transportation projects open houses. I hope you've been to one of those. If you haven't, be on the lookout. But in that room, we will bring together the VDOT staff and our own transportation staff, and then invite all of the citizens that are affected, but all the civic associations. And that I've seen that work really well because you've got all the people in the room who are hearing directly. So I think things like that. And then you mentioned the My Arlington app. I just want to highlight that the app itself no longer works on iOS, and there's a whole nother reason for that. But the report a problem is very front of our Arlington County website page, and that does go to a human who then tracks it, puts a timer on it, and nudges people to make sure it gets done. And we'll talk about more of that in the transparency section, but there's hope. There's a little bit of hope on both of those.
Thank you. And I don't know, I mean, Columbia Pike, if anyone wants to take ownership of that not easy moment, just surfacing that, that's a piece of it, and Vision Zero are two things left to finish, and want to defer to Maureen and Takis. You haven't had a chance, so go ahead.
Well, first of all, the initiation of the conversation is how are principals faring in a completely different constrained environment, because for delivery, we need to have an economy that is capable of delivering. If you look at the number of site plans that we haven't realized, that we have to extend, et cetera, this is a concerning trend. So the value proposition, I mean, either you look at Richmond Highway, either you look at Langston, actually, we will have this conversation, the first conversation here. Or you look even on Columbia Pike, where we have a stalled pipeline, basically, right? It sounds like a luxury to discuss the next level of that when the base motor, the economic motor of improvements is right now sputtering. And that's something that we need to understand. I mean, in the entire discussion before, we forgot where the rest of the region is. It is very difficult, actually, for the federal government to defund the local government. It is very easy to defund its contractors, and when $13.5 billion of contracted volume disappear from Arlington alone, then you can imagine. I mean, the job postings, for example, are down 15%. The residential sales in Arlington are up 52%. The private bankruptcies are twice the average. So there are reasons to be very concerned about all this. So what does it have to do with planning? We have come to a level where our residents, and the Civic Federation has been leading this, want a very high delivery on quality of life attributes, right? That includes Vision Zero. That includes walkable thoroughfares, main arterials, etc. The planning principles are still there. The economic base is right now not so easily available for that. And we have to reconsider, because one of the things that really moves my mind anyway is how do we get this through anyway, so that we have to have a mutual agreement that we have to make some compromises and get things done in places where under normal circumstances we probably would be more reluctant to do them. So we have to take some heat on our principles and be very practical as soon as we possibly can. It's not a very good thing to have at the same time a crisis and a housing crisis at the same time, right? So we can influence a lot delivery on our plans if we can be more expeditious about them right now.
Great. Thank you. So we touched on Brian, and we also have to clean up the last two of these questions, and I'm mindful that you guys are going to have questions as well. Do you two want to just help us conclude? I want to try and get to answers to the other topics, the other question that you had on Vision Zero.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I was just going to lean in a little bit to what Nicole, you talked about. So we have the Arlington Transportation Future, which just ended its third phase, and we're going to have the results out here in the spring of 2026. You know, the larger context of when you think about transportation, it's not, in my opinion, north, south. I mean, you think about South Crawling Springs and the pedestrian work we're doing down there. You think about Military Road. You think about a whole host of areas. It is something whereby in the Columbia Pike Initiative, for example, it took 15 years to get it to where it's at right now. And even as we saw at the end, it wasn't that easy, right? We had issues. So I think in the big picture of transportation, what we need here at the county is this continuum partnership, right, that we have like today between CivFed and the county board and other stakeholders you brought up, or neighborhood associations. But in my experience, what I've seen is that it's been very limited who shows up to the table to make some of these points and argue on behalf of these communities. And so I think we have gotten it right, got better when it comes to engaging with the community, at least since I've been here. But there's a lot of work to go. Are we at a point where it's perfect? No, not even close. But I think we have better good news stories than bad news stories when it comes to transportation. That's what I want to add. And sure, you can also come to I think we have the ribbon cutting of Columbia Pike Multimodal Project in April. Yep. So come on by and cut a ribbon.
Yep. Maureen, did you want to close this area? Mindful that there are two other questions, and we've tried to sort of labor at these two pieces.
Yeah, I'll try and be as short as possible. Now that the construction phase on Columbia Pike is done, it does enable us to start looking at some of those true investments in bus service. I think in particular, I'm excited about the possibility of priority signal for bus service that keeps the speed of service going when you don't have to stop and wait at every single red light. And so that's something that with the upgrades we've done can be enabled. It's not going to be there from day one now, but it was not even possible before we did all of this construction. And so look out for that moving forward. And then Vision Zero, I think our Vision Zero team is one of the best in the entire county as far as staff teams go. They are so values invested, deeply committed to this work. And I have heard from them as well that because I think they are so good at it, everyone reaches out to them hoping for their piece to get accomplished. And that's a real testament to them. But I don't know that we have, outside of the report of problem side of things, I don't know that we have really like a coherent philosophy on how to triage, because sometimes there are data-driven reasons why investments are happening in one place and your thing might be on the list, but 20 spots down, and sometimes it might be no one knew about it and it's not on the list. And we really need, I do think that like part of conversations that we are having, and maybe we can get to on the transparency side, but is around how do we make sure there is that ability for people to input without it becoming people jumping the line because they just complained enough to skip over the places where the data has identified like a real safety issue or something like that. And so it's kind of a balance, because we don't want to shut people out, because there are times where people bring up something that genuinely isn't on the radar. But we also want to make sure that we're being equitable, we're being considerate and intentional about where we deploy these investments, and not just the most organized block of the street that is getting 100% of our investment. So
I think That's well said, and what I suggest we do is we follow up on that piece. I'm thinking down the Hawk Signals list, and a very organized couple of individuals who've made it clear that I need to do better. So, which is okay. That's part of what we're supposed to do. But we'll follow up, and I would just suggest that we work and send you a note, Nicole, to follow up, and we can copy you, Nick, as well. Over to Jackie and to Bill. I know you guys will have plenty of questions. Jackie first.
Do I have to turn this on?
Yep. There you go.
I'm going to talk.
Pull the mic down toward you. There you go.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. The topic is community benefits.
Yeah.
And this is a tool that you're all familiar with that actually pulls together much of the conversation we've been having up until now, because it's a tool in planning and zoning and in site plan that Arlington has chosen to use as a method for both incentivizing density, which is one of the things that we have a goal for, and of providing the support for that density. So the infrastructure that you've been talking about here and how we plan in difficult economic circumstances for how we use public and private funding together for that implementation, this is where that integration, that coordination exists. Mm-hmm. So we want to, it's obviously a very hot topic right now. We've started some work on this, both at Civic and you all. I want to commend you for highlighting the importance of this in the audit that has been underway and that we're all waiting day by day for release. Basically the two things that we've identified thus far is transparency is lacking. Both for the citizens, the site plan participants, and we think perhaps for the board. And our CIFED resolution called for having more transparency and identifying upfront what the options are that are under consideration for each site plan. And the audit is looking at whether or not the decisions that are made are implemented, tracked, and followed up. Do we receive what we negotiate? And that will move us a long ways to answering it. But what we've learned in the process is that it's really a much bigger picture than this site level implementation that is so intense, and that we need to look at it from a much higher level. We can only scratch the surface today, but what we'd like to do is have this initiate a conversation that is, in Maureen's words, more intentional with a more coherent strategy for how we're going to accomplish this. And that's exactly what we want to get. So our questions for you are in the context of, do you agree that this is an important area of board accountability and planning? And will you consider taking action to address this at a higher level in terms of a broader review of the planning and the process systematically? And I have 4 sort of related questions that you can use to answer those. The first one is, should we have a county level plan or sector level plans for implementing the infrastructure that we need for the density that we're adding? Because if we did have, then you could look at each site plan and say, okay, what are the priorities for what contribution this site plan will make towards that? What's their share and how are they going to contribute to that plan? You could even identify how it directly does the plan. So that's number one, and that's the bigger picture that I'm talking about. The second one is, if we had that, what we called for in our resolution is that you direct staff to produce and provide a list at the beginning right at the very beginning, based on the site, of what the planning context is overall for infrastructure in that area, not the site, but the area writ large in terms of the infrastructure, and that the options for community benefit be in that context. So here's our plan, here's the things we want. Basically, we have a plan that's a public-private funding requirement. here's where we're going to want to try to ask for private funding in exchange for the benefit of density, which upzoning gives them money. Third, how can this process be more transparent? Obviously, these things would help, but be much more specific about what in writing. There's nothing written about what the community role is in community benefits. And we believe we need some more specific guidance on that. And then fourth, we'd like to see you get reports that provide and track the types of benefits that you get from each site plan, the approximate value of those benefits, and what they are in the context of what the density, value of the density is that you've conveyed. And of course, we'd like to see the site plans rolled up into, here's what we got for community benefits this year that help us implement our plan for infrastructure, particularly transportation, stormwater, and all those things that are more than just one site. So the questions were, do you agree this is important and how? And would you be willing to consider, some more specific intentional action to study this?
4 questions, fair bit of detail. I think Susan may have a few thoughts.
I have the answer. We'll be done in 2 minutes. It's such an easy topic, the community benefits approach. But no, in all seriousness, no, we have been special in how we've approached this over time, and it's actually worked out very, very, very well for Arlington County. And the problem is, as with any great plan, the world keeps changing around you. And so historically, we've had, the sector plans lay out the priorities, they identify infrastructure needs, along with the comprehensive plan elements that continue to look every 5 years, are we meeting those needs? The problem is right now is the world has changed a little bit. So we're doing more adaptive reuse, for instance, than we're doing actual site plan delivery. That looks a lot different in terms of whether there is any community benefit and what might be needed. So yes, we hear you and agree. This board that is still relatively new in our composition, very early on agreed that we need to do better on explaining comprehensive community benefit, on understanding them ourselves and making sure staff are communicating clearly in each site plan, and then on tracking them going forward. And so what you'll see on March 23rd, if all holds together, is the 1 year long audit of community benefits. It is not everything you want to see. It is from the point where the board acted forward, is to say, was it clear what the benefits were? Were they delivered? If they fell off, what happened? If there needed to be a substitute, did everyone know? That sort of thing. So that will be, and by necessity to do that audit, we had to get our auditor team and our board even better at understanding what the heck we're talking about, right? And I think for those of you who follow our site plans, we've been trying to get more consistent tools as well so that we're having some reputation. There's a lot of work that can be done there, and we will look forward to CIFED continuing to be a partner on that, but I think we are focused on it. We need to stay somewhat nimble because it will change with the economy, what you can get and still get a project delivered. And we don't expect each project on its own to deliver everything that project will future need, because it will be generating revenue, it will be helping pay off bonds as well. And so it's, there's no magic formula, but there is a thoughtful approach to it. We can explain it better, we can track it better, and we look forward to being your partner with that.
Thank you. Jackie, did you want to follow up? I mean, we also...
What about things like, right now, and certainly Langston Boulevard, where it's an example, and one of the other things that I didn't mention is we're doing more and more, not the redevelopment, but more and more new development in areas that aren't along the metro. And so they don't have that transportation infrastructure first. They've got cars. And if we're trying to go from cars that are well managed to a main street, then that's a lot of infrastructure work. So this is where there isn't an implementation plan. Now, we've got really great data to do implementation on stormwater, but it's only site by site. So, but we have expectations of what we have to accomplish overall to make it work. We don't have that for transportation. So we can't say, here are the things that are our goals and what we need to implement, and here are the 5 things that we have identified as potential community benefits where we could get a contribution. I'm not saying how much or even what it might be, but for each site plan, here are the 5 things that are within scope for this discussion. Because right now, there is a very short list of community facilities and infrastructure, but there isn't any scope for each one. And so it has ideas that are pitted against each other, some of which are not realistic or might be realistic but not for that site, things like that. So it would really advance the process. And right now, none of those are shared with the public.
Great, so I have 3 people who might want to speak. Susan, you want to start, then Takis, then Maureen?
I was just going to say they are shared at a macro level in each of the area plans. So Langston Boulevard does have transportation priorities laid out in there. Transportation Master Plan also does, the CIP does. And then as we negotiate with our regional partners to get the transportation-specific funding that we have generated to get it back into projects, we're also balancing that as well. So it sounds like we could definitely communicate it more clearly, but there are some plans in there. It's just not necessarily project by project, and probably shouldn't be, because you don't know which project's going to go first, and it matters where you are in that process. So.
Great. I don't know who should go first, but brevity is the soul of wit for the 2 of you. Takis, go.
I mean, the contribution of each proposal to the overall sector plan goals is easy to see. I mean, we know what the plan wants, and we can have always a discussion, and this is part of the public process today, whether the project contributes towards that or not, right? Even I mean, we cannot do that more bespoke or more compartmentalized for each project, because I don't believe that you will have actually a higher reluctance to initiate a project, etc., rather than not. So an element of negotiation will be always part of that. Truly, the negotiation has to be transparent. The results of the negotiation have to be transparent. The tracking the results of the negotiation have to be transparent. But still, the biggest public benefit, I mean, public benefits in Virginia law are also framed in the idea of mitigating impact, right? This is why we have limited our public benefits discussion and negotiation to the additional density, which I believe is not the biggest public benefit that any new development delivers. The number one benefit that a public benefit that a new development delivers is actually the increased tax base, the additional value that comes and pays for our schools, for everything else. So this also contributes to the plan, and this is why we have corridor plans for that, which I think is significant. I mean, in my neighborhood, I've seen the available value going in the last 20 years, going up almost doubling or more. So that's significant, and that needs to be factored in. And the interesting part here is we see with adaptive reuse right now that, we take an empty building that's basically dead, and we give it new value, and we still don't have a good mechanism to sequester part of this value and reinvest it in, in key deliverables of the plan. The board can make that decision, but we haven't discussed how exactly we want to do that. We have vast sectors, especially Crystal City and Pentagon City, who need this discussion right now because they have been underinvested in the past. So there are no public facilities. There are aging assets that need improvement, and they counted with significant density, and this density probably won't materialize anytime soon, maybe in the future, but not right now. And so in the interim, we need to sequester some value and invest in the success of this plan.
We will learn from that. I want to hear more at another time about the notion that the upzoning itself, the increase in the value, is the primary value. It's not in the definition of community benefits. Community benefits in the code and in what's authorized at the state level are affordable housing
Mitigation.
and community facilities. Well, the community facilities isn't so much mitigation, it's providing for the increased density so that you're not
Yeah, it's
putting
an
popul-
impact that needs to be
Yes.
mitigated and
Yes,
met.
and same thing with the transportation. But that point that you made is not, I don't think, universally agreed to, so we need to understand that better.
I mean, two components, there's the code, and then there's the nexus test, which is a piece of interpretation that our county attorneys raise.
Right, right.
So we have to think about that, and transparency and understanding that is not easy. See the Hotel Pentagon discussion. Yes?
Yeah, well, and I think your point there also highlights one thing that came up quite a bit as our county auditors embarked upon this audit was around the language we may colloquially use around community benefits versus the legally binding definition of a community benefit, because I think, and that, that really goes to some of what you're talking about. How do we communicate about it? Because some of the things that we historically have maybe put on a slide that says community benefit is actually something legally that we should be calling a site plan condition, or and the language we use is so blurry in this space that it does create confusion, because the things that are a community benefit are the things that they are using to earn their bonus density in their site plan development. And that is a much more limited thing than what any normal person would consider when they're looking at something to be a community benefit. I think cool architecture to some people could be, to them, a community benefit. It is not on an on-paper, legal standard, a community benefit that is going towards earning that density. And so I think that, I expect Wayne to have a number of recommendations for us around a lot of different elements here. But that's one thing that Susan and I, as the co-chairs of audit, talking with Wayne, have, that was like a whole process in and of itself, was just what it, kind of philosophically, right? Like, what is a community benefit? And then I think the other part around hyper detailed plans, especially on transportation, because developers are earning that density in a way that is value driven, and it's a certain dollar amount. Sometimes we have plans that ask for so many things that are so expensive, we ultimately end up getting to those plans and then having to pick things that we're doing, because a stormwater infrastructure upgrade costs so much that they, feasibly sometimes can earn their entire bonus density through one benefit. And then where does that leave undergrounding utilities and the sidewalk upgrades and the green space, and so I worry a little bit about getting too prescriptive in some of these plans about what the block by block, who pays for what and when, looks like, because you just don't know what projects are going to come. And to Susan's point as well, you don't know when in the sequence they come. So I think there's a lot here, and we're going to keep talking about it, but that's just kind of one of my first concerns, is if you say this transportation thing, and transportation infrastructure is some of the most expensive work that we do, that may start eating away at affordability or our environmental priorities or our public space and green space priorities. And having the ability to be a little squishy creates vagueness and confusion sometimes, but also allows us to flex, to figure out on a case by case what is right. And I think, to me, that's one of the most important things in this community benefits conversation, is around how do we balance that desire to flex and fit the right thing for each individual project with that predictability that we started off this conversation with, that we should have some degree of knowing what's coming, knowing what's on the table, knowing what's even allowed to be an option. I don't know that we have that balance right today, but I also don't know that I could tell you what is even right. And I think what's right for me might not be what you think is right. So
I would imagine that you have thoughts that, and we owe you a response on a specific letter you shared from several civic associations. I think there's a real opportunity for follow-up here, and I want to give Bill some space to share his thoughts. And we're late, and my bosses, these bosses and that boss are all saying, and then my wife at home boss is saying, come home to your kids. But let's have the full conversation, but let's get Bill a chance, if that's okay, Jackie.
Absolutely.
And I would say, to credit to Susan and Maureen for the audit, the conversation has started. I don't think there's a silver bullet that this is going to fix all, but I do think that additional transparency and follow-up is appropriate. And so I would ask that between you and David, we start an email string that can seek to work on this to get you and us as a community some greater clarity. So if that's okay.
Yes, and we thank you for the audit. We're very excited about the results.
Great, thank you. Bill.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to try to pose three different questions, slightly different areas. One is about the update to the comprehensive plan, which is what is the scope of that, and a little bit more transparency on that, I think is appropriate. A second is a Dillon Rule question based on some legislation that is coming down from Richmond on zoning and planning. And the third is one of my favorite subjects, lot coverage versus impervious surface study. On the comprehensive plan, I think, and Susan and Takis were very helpful in coming to our Civic Association last week and got some questions about this, but here's the $64,000 question that I don't think has been flagged as well as it should for the public to comment on. The general land use plan has had a core principle, and I'm just quoting, to concentrate high-density development within transit corridors and to preserve and enhance existing single-family and apartment neighborhoods. By the way, this is an issue that's identified in the CivFed resolution back in June as something that needs more transparency. The quick question is, will the board reconsider this principle in phase 1 or phase 2 of the pending update? The second question, the Dillon Rule question, is, as I think we all know, for many years, the county has striven mightily to keep Richmond off of our local government authority on zoning and planning matters. But pending legislation this year would strip away local authority to establish parking requirements and zoning requirements for nonprofits partnering on affordable housing projects. The question is, does the board support such changes depriving you of your well-established authority to decide about parking and zoning in these respects? And the third question is, and I want to distinguish between the efforts of, as you know, 27 civic associations. I've been working with them, and JD, to your point about who they represent, they're representing a lot of neighborhoods in a wide variety of economic neighborhoods in Arlington, and they don't make their commitments to their concerns lightly. So there's a variety of them that are concerned that the county has transformed its commitment to a lot coverage study in the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan 2 years ago, transformed a zoning problem into a stormwater management problem. And we don't have time enough to, get into the different views on that. But the key, I guess I would just say, is looking at the Jacobs Engineering study, which is underway, as I understand it, to as a consultant to inform what the board is going to be doing. That's a study, as I understand it, of simply one thing, which is if you have a whole lot of impervious area, more than perhaps we now do, what kind of impact is that going to have on pollution and runoff? And we don't understand how that study could possibly inform the board about the zoning impacts of tear downs of smaller houses, less expensive houses, in favor of much larger, expensive houses, impacts on neighborhood and impacts on tree canopy. Now, as I said, those are concerns that the 27 different civic associations have. CivFed has had an interest in this issue, and in its climate change resolution, it specifically endorsed implementation of the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan. It has not taken a position on whether what these concerns of the 27 civic associations are or are not legitimate, but it is actively studying the problem. So I'd appreciate, in the time remaining, how you can use a stormwater runoff study to address any of those zoning concerns.
These are tough questions, so I'm happy to share the mic. I think on the first question, comp plan, we have two liaisons who lead, so I'm open to whichever. I'm willing to offer an opinion, but it's the two liaisons who lead who should at least take a first crack at it.
Sure. Do you want to take that one, or I'll go? Actually, why don't you go, because Bill's already heard from me in the last week. That way he can have different ideas.
And thank you both for going.
So I don't think that phase one is intended to specifically address that core element that I know so many people seem very, very worried about. The intro chapter and the proposed potential principles are meant to guide not just the GLUP, but the overall entire 12-element comprehensive plan. The hypothetical phase two, I can't speak to because it does not yet exist and has no scope. That, as the board embarked upon moving forward with the comp plan update, working with staff, one of the things that the board became very clear about was not wanting a predetermined, presupposed phase two to come out of this. And so we really intentionally put a checkpoint in. Phase one will conclude with a proposed scope for what phase two could look like, and then there will be substantial engagement with the board on whether we concur with that scope, whether we're ready to move it forward, kind of where that all will land. So I think on that part, I don't think we are addressing that element at this time, and phase two could, but it doesn't exist yet, so I can't say.
I think that's very helpful. I would just ask that when and if the board wants to consider changes to that pretty fundamental social compact, it should be very, very clear that it's doing that and seeking public comment on that.
Sure, and I will announce for all of us here today that at the recess meeting this month, which is the 24th, I want to say, our staff who have been part of the comp plan engagement will be giving their kind of preliminary presentation. They've done the initial analysis of the feedback, so they have not started drafting anything. They have not started writing the intro chapter, but they have gotten far enough through the analysis of the 7 or so other channels of engagement that we did with the community around these kind of broad guiding principles for the comprehensive plan. And so at the meeting, the manager will invite our planning staff up, and they will, none of us here have seen it. We will be just as surprised as you are. But I know people are interested, so I just want to flag that here while we're talking about it.
Susan, did you want to?
I can hit lot coverage and impervious area.
Back to me for, well.
Or we can, Yeah, anyone can. I think on the impervious area question, so there is some new information posted in the last week or so from the phase 1 efforts. So I would encourage you to go look at that. It includes some benchmarking, which I found really interesting, because I already knew that Vienna does it a certain way, because I've talked to Bill a number of times in the last 10 years. Vienna, Virginia is the only other jurisdiction that we found that did the lot coverage approach to it that we have in our current, and they have half as much, they have bigger lots, but they have half as much coverage as we do, that's allowed roughly. But take a look at those materials, and I think we'll also be getting an update on Tuesday at that same meeting about where we are on the study and what staff recommend about going forward. But those materials are posted already. I think comp plan will be, but haven't been posted yet. So worth tagging that. And I think the question that we have all been grappling with is there's no question that we have a problem, right? That there's more water and less space for it to go, and that there are fewer trees and less space for them to go, and that we have these things called houses that need to fit in here somewhere, right? So what we set the staff off onto initially is to look at all three of those things and how they work together and what potential compromises and trade-offs might be. And so whether it ends up in the zoning code eventually or it actually lands in a different part of the county ordinance, the goal is to manage plantable area, to manage stormwater, and that by definition will impact building footprint, right? So impervious surfaces include the building, they include stormwater pits, that don't percolate all the way down. And those are complicated and very interdisciplinary issues that I am really, really pleased that the manager and the broader team, 2 years ago, we looked at each other and said, do we have a problem? And everyone said, yes, we do. But how we fix it without breaking other things is a conversation that we will have deeply once that data is brought back to us, and we would expect your feedback as always.
Well, I'll take a look at the data that's now available, but I think I want to make clear it's not just a concern about do we have enough room to plant trees. I think the big concern, the elephant in the room, as we put it, is the tear down that takes away mature tree stands everywhere, takes away smaller houses, and you're only indirectly looking at that if you're focusing on the stormwater impacts, the runoff impacts. You're not looking at the impacts on neighboring homes or on the mature tree canopy. And we have, as you know, despite our collective efforts this week, very little authority under state law to deal with tree canopy, and we tried to get more, and it looks like we didn't get it much. This is an area where we have very broad authority under the zoning code if we make the requisite findings to deal with the massive teardown problem that your late colleague Eric Gutschall recognized, wow, we never thought it would be this bad. So I touched a little bit on what Richmond is doing, so I appreciate just your response to that Dillon Rule issue about eliminating your authority, stripping it away to impose parking space requirements and, frankly, any zoning requirements at all for certain kinds of projects.
Maureen?
Yeah, I was so hopeful you were talking about our tree bill, but I think this is a very challenging time for local government in Richmond. The environment is quite different from what it's been in the past. I think there are 5 board members and 5 different opinions on what it is that Richmond should do with some of these bills. I think we are doing the best that we can at this point to understand both the political reality in Richmond, because some of these are moving no matter what anyone in any local government says or does, and there's VACO and VML are expending a lot of political capital on some of this, and getting shut out of the room, frankly, at this point. And so there's a balancing act of figuring out where local control matters most and where mitigating the potential conflicts with how Arlington has done our housing and development. And we're trying our best to kind of toe the line of not getting shut out of any of those conversations, because if they do go forward, we want something we can live with. Some of them could be very challenging, especially for the way that we do our community benefits and bonus density and all of the things that, realistically have made development in Arlington actually create a community that we all love and enjoy. There are some bills that genuinely fundamentally would threaten that process. There are other bills that are, I would say, less of a threat to the outcomes we all care about. But ultimately, none of the five of us have a vote when it comes to Richmond. So I think we're doing the best we can. I think it is also hard to be Arlington in this conversation when we have a history and a track record of doing our part on housing. When COG set those housing target goals, we have been keeping up with our housing targets for the most part. I think kind of COVID being a little set aside for everyone, but and then the reality of what Richmond looks at with others in the region and the Commonwealth that have not been such good partners. And oftentimes these bills, while maybe impacting Arlington, when you talk to legislators, they're not doing it because they want to change what's going on in Arlington. They're doing it because they want to change what's going on in other places. And we are kind of a byproduct of what they're doing. So those are just some of the dynamics, but I think there's five of us, and we all, if we were down there, would probably be negotiating different things.
Well, and I would just point you to our legislative agenda that this board did pass, and it did indicate that our preference is to retain local control. And it's not because we don't want to do what Richmond wants us to do. It's that we're already doing that, and we're doing it in an Arlington-specific way, and that it's very, very difficult to create something that works for every county and every city in the Commonwealth. So yes, and it's spelled out there in our legislative agenda from the fall that if all things were equal, our preference would be for either incentives and support, encouragement, rather than dictation.
Great. We are still, I hope that's helpful. I do think following up would be good. Each of your questions, there's a lot to them. I'd ask that we go to the third topic, the third bucket. And while we're doing a shift change, we'll try and be as efficient as possible. And please do follow up with us. Thank you each very much. I thought we were being efficient, but I'm behind schedule. And so next, we have folks talk about transparency. And I don't know, are you going to introduce, David? Sure. Okay. And we'll let you begin to introduce as we get to the next pieces. And colleagues and everyone, I apologize for being a bit tardy, but we'll have to work with it. So Nick, I think you're good to let David start. Is that right? Or did you want to?
I am great to have David start. David is our chairman of the board this year, and he's taking on the panel.
Great. We'll go for it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to be snappy because I know we want to get out of here. We're going to talk about connecting with local government. What an awesome way to put theory into practice. We're sitting across the table from the county board. We got the county manager over here. This is really awesome. Thank you. And the last thing I'll say before I pass this down to my colleagues here is that I want to thank you for all the OT you put in on this topic, right? And I don't mean overtime, I mean own time. I know you all put a lot of your own time into this, so thank you so much, appreciate it. So I was going to do more introductions, but let's just move down the line. Go ahead and introduce yourselves and jump into the topics.
8-second soundbite.
That's right, let's move fast.
Yeah. Yep.
On?
Yep.
On.
There you go.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for this. Happy Lunar New Year to those who celebrate. I appreciate it. I'm not one of the muckety mucks of the Civic Federation. I'm a Bluemont Civic Association president, and as such, I walk neighborhoods and listen to people, especially when they're shoveling snow, which has been really fun lately. And there's a lot of things the board and the county does beautifully. The audit committee is awesome. Sarah in your office is fantastic. Appreciate working with her. There's a lot of good things, but I'm not here to talk about all the good things because we don't have, we need to talk about what to improve. So sorry about that. I'm
It's okay.
rolling in. So to prepare for this, I actually did my walk around over a lot of ice and snow and talked to people and tried to collect their thoughts. And they were, as you can imagine, in a grumbly mood. But I think it's also what I hear, what I've been hearing for some time. So one question is, why aren't they listening to us? And as an example, people do talk about, talk to a couple of people, as women who stop me and say, what's happening with that lot coverage study? You know, we've been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. Why is there no motion? And there's a lot of confusion about why is it taking so long? And it's on us at the neighborhood level to try to explain that. That's kind of complicated. Another is that came up was, how did the county misrepresent the Civic Association role in things such as snow removal? So on the county site, and I wrote y'all a letter, on the county site there was a reference to contacting your Civic Association to help with your snow removal. We can't do that. We don't own a snowplow, we don't have liability, and we got a lot of calls. And so we were put in a really awkward position of trying to find help for people, but we couldn't do it ourselves. And so somehow there was a disconnect on what our role is as civic associations and where some resources actually are. So that's just one example of somehow the communication is off. The knowledge of neighborhoods has been a point of frustration. So I talked to Matt about this not long ago. The infamous left turn signal on North George Mason and Wilson Boulevard. We've been talking about it for 13 years. Is anyone listening? Why is there, do people just not know the neighborhood? Have they been down here? Do they see us? And so, again, it feels like we're trying to help with the communications, but we're not able to, we can't offer the answers because we don't have them. So that was, that's an issue in one form or another that keeps coming up. And then one other thing, I think someone else said that earlier, is language gets really murky and jargony. So there was a problem with a crossing. We were seeing if we could get a blinking light, and one of our members put in a report of problem saying, well, maybe this is a way to navigate this because it's not terribly safe. And the response he got through the report of problem, which is a good tool, what referred to Vision Zero. And it said that the county has the resources to install rectangular rapid flashing beacons at approximately 3 to 5 new crossings each year, but in order to deploy these, you have to, all crossings are ranked using criteria. Mystery, what is the ranking? Who ranks it? How do we get more information? None of it was on this. No contact person. However, the person who put that in knew about Vision Zero, and he even knew the staff person to contact. So he talked to them and got some real information. If you're Joe Gablotnick citizen, you would have no idea how to get that information. You might not even go to your civic association because you might not know who they are, right? So at the level at which I operate, which is, rank and file, people on the street picking away the ice off their driveway, trying to do the right thing by the county, there is a lot of mystery in how the county functions and what the jargon means and how do you get through. They're bombarded by many, many, many newsletters, input sessions, surveys, all of that. But a lot of the folks don't really understand that and whether that makes any difference. Yes, we put out surveys. We have a newsletter. It goes to nearly 500 people every week. We try to communicate that, but it doesn't necessarily take with understanding of the recipients. So I don't quite know how to navigate that public engagement piece. There was a lot of us from this Civic Association here today, which goes to show how we are trying to engage, but we're missing it all the time. So I'm going to turn that over to, or however we do it. The board will talk about it. Okay.
Yeah, and I think for this one, we had a couple of folks, I think it's Susan Takis, we're going to take point, but I also, if I'm not mistaken, but I also am happy to take a crack if you guys want to pass it back to me. I've been ducking hard questions all night, so go ahead.
There's a lot there, and I think maybe to the same as we did with Nicole earlier, there is some hope in that we hear that and we notice it and we are trying to improve on it. Report a Problem is still relatively new in kind of being open to all kinds of challenges. It does have real life, very patient and awesome humans behind it who are using that to try to get people where they need to be, not flawlessly, but for me and the things I've put in, it's been fairly effective even when I put them in under my neighbor's name because I like to test the system. But I think the snow letter you sent, this was an extraordinarily unusual storm, and so while it can both be true that we did a pretty good job given the circumstances and that we screwed up in a few places. And so we'll have more conversation about that this month and next probably as well. But one of the screw ups is, whatever language got in there about civic associations may have been true 10 or 15 years ago when there was a snow whatever you call it, remover that you could rent or that could be shared by civic associations, but that went by the wayside, So it may have been true at one time and we didn't catch it.
Well, and I think there are some civic associations that coordinate volunteers that go and help other neighbors who cannot shovel themselves, but not all civic associations have that, and I think therein lies.
Right, and it's a liability issue. So we have to be hyper careful about how we engage.
And I think it was identified pretty early on in this storm because of the intensity of the ice that we need something like that going forward. So Alexandria actually helped us out a little bit with trying to match people up. I think we'll be looking to volunteer Arlington and would welcome your ideas about how do we do that going forward, because again, back to the aging population, we need that. We need that, and the storms are getting weirder and more intense in strange ways, and so we're going to have ice going forward in all likelihood, and we've got a lot of sidewalk. There's no way that we're going to be, New York City and go plow all the sidewalks.
So do we have anything more on snow that's brief? Sorry, Susan, you mentioned, JD, did you have anything on snow? Sorry, Susan.
Are we talking specifically about snow?
Yeah.
I have a comment, but I think we've heard about
Let's
snow.
go back to Susan, and then we'll fit you in.
I would just flag two other pieces. So the why the heck is something taking so long is a really good question. So back to the comp plan, I think we articulated, we're giving it a lot of marination time, even more probably than staff would have appreciated, because if we ever do change anything there, it impacts everyone and for a long time. And so we want to make sure that the most people as possible do hear about it. And I know you've been at some of the engagement opportunities. We engineered trying to make sure that pockets of community members that don't usually show up were invited and felt comfortable coming. And that was time-consuming, somewhat successful, but is all part of kind of learning new tools. Then you get to the lot coverage study. Like, I know it's on schedule because we put a schedule up a year and a half ago and we're exactly on it, but you're not thinking about it every day. It's like in my top 10 things I'm thinking about every day, but most people are not. So if you heard something about it a year ago, and you haven't heard anything in a while. So I think we have a lot to do in a world where there's an overload of information to figure out, and it may vary civic association by civic association, what would be helpful to give you the tools to amplify things, because I mean, I get too much email from the county because I signed up for too many of the things, right? And I know others feel that way as well. So I think we're in the process. We have a new and awesome communications team, constituent services, this board, our board team are all focused on how do we communicate with a community that's changing and in a world where there's just too much information. I think our incoming emails are like up 3x from, year to year. So even though our response time is much better, thank you to the staff, it's growing fairly exponentially. And so there's those are kind of challenges we're all working through together.
Great. JD?
Sure, I'll keep it tight here. So Kate, thank you for your comments, and I wrote down your questions here. A few weeks ago, I celebrated 17 years of being in Arlington. Mm-hmm. I'm a Southsider, right? But your questions are some that still resonate with me today that I even had an inquiry of 17 years ago. Mm-hmm. Why aren't they listening to me? Does anyone really understand the neighborhood? I mean, I was here for a number of years, and I consider myself a pretty political tied individual. I didn't see my county board members back then. Mm-hmm. We come out now. And there was a mystery of how the county functions, is what you stated. Now, I have 13 months under my belt. And I'm going to tell you this, that admitting failure, there's no problem with saying that. And quite honestly, we have not received an A grade, I would think, as a county in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it's inexcusable. Are we meeting the moment? Whether it's Snowgate, and it's not the first time it snowed in 17 years of being here, but were we prepared for the moment? We did the best we could. Mm-hmm. What all this tells us, it tells me at least, is that there's a broader conversation to have about moving at the pace of need, and if we are right-sized to meet the moment as a county. Mm-hmm. Because for some odd reason or another, right, systems change. You heard my colleague talk about the communities changing, right? Well, it's going to continue to change. And if we aren't willing to innovate and change in the moment, then we're going to get left behind. And the issues that you're talking about, the issues that I experienced 17 years ago, will be here 17 years from now. It's not about newsletters or emails. It's about personal connection and understanding the neighborhood. Right. And we have to do a better job at that. And I think all of us here on the board are doing our due diligence in that effort, but it's hard when you have 234,000 people here today. Mm-hmm. So I think this goes to a larger conversation that's warranted. Our staff is limited. Our comms team is phenomenal, but they're also small. They're not the biggest, right? But I just want to share that because your comment today, as those coming from Bluemont, those same questions resonate in Green Valley, mm-hmm. in Aurora Hills, Highlands, and elsewhere around our community. And we hear it all the time. The question is, are we meeting the moment? And I think we still have a lot of room to go. Okay. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Great. I'm mindful we've got two others, but
one last,
go ahead.
Very quick, I promise, comment. I think there's also one of the things that I have noticed, and I know we've moved off planning, but comp plan was such an up close, perfect version of that for Susan and I as the liaisons. Sometimes, no matter how much you communicate, people are not ready. They are focused on other things. They have lives, they have children, they have school, they have work. And I think the comp plan, so much energy and effort was expended to try and like almost force people to participate in the engagement. And you still didn't see the numbers that I think some of us would have really liked to see in that. And, you know, there are the people who are in this room, right, who really want to know stuff and will put in that effort to come and find it out. And then there's a lot of people you talk to who think about something once and never even Google it, right? Like they don't even try. They're just kind of like, why isn't the county doing that? And if you took, 5 seconds to look it up, you could probably find some level of information. And so like there is a little bit of a tension. The more we communicate out, the more overwhelming it can be sometimes, and things get missed. And sometimes more communicating does not actually get you more people understanding. And so I don't have a solution for that, but I just think that was like one of the biggest takeaways from comp plan is our staff went above and beyond with, five languages of translation, multiple online, in-person focus groups, paid community liaisons, survey, pop-ups, street canvassing, and it was still just like pulling teeth to get, and this is a conversation people have been saying that they are interested in and they want to have, and so there is only sometimes so much we can do to force information to people, and then it's our lovely partners that we're going to rely on to help get us the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I'm a communicator.
Yeah.
That's my training.
Awesome.
But this is an engagement issue.
Yes,
It's
that's
not
right.
a communications issue.
Yeah.
It's a different issue. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, what that nexus looks like. Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we got 2 more buckets. Go ahead, Takas, you were on this.
Kate, I've been in your shoes, the snowshoes as well. I mean, already in 2010, I was president of my civic association, and this was so impressive, the event back then, that we said, county, until the county arrives, I mean, we have to be active here, and we actually went out and tried to do the wrong thing, which was to gather people to shovel themselves. Back then, I didn't understand nothing about how dangerous that may be for people who I don't know and whose, health conditions I don't know. The issue here is more complex. I think, over time we have lost media here. I mean, there is no town paper, etc. Even the Washington Post is now very scarcely, right? And that has been a lot. The emergence of social media has actually encapsulated people in their respective bubbles, so they're not so open. I remember we would do every year a civic association event in a bar, because that was important. People would come, and we would actually, the topic was how to call county, how to do anything, etc. In good times, we would go around and distribute freezer, magnets for people to have, and we have these. It is literally a civic effort to reconnect governance, not government, but I've seen over time, I mean, if you go here and you stand for an hour in front of the Trader Joe's in Clarendon, you will find people who know even way more, like orders of magnitude, less. Orders of magnitude less about anything that the local government does. But they will know, that Metro has a problem and things, so you can engage. So this is why the civic sphere is so important, and we have to find a common modus a place of collaboration to improve, because I have no discussion about that. We need to invest in this, and we need to invest also money, which was not always non-controversial. Every single time I was was visiting the neighborhood improvement program, which is one of our commissions that is extremely democratic. It's like the Civic Federation, because everybody has a delegate there. Every single neighborhood. And this was always the discussion. Every year, the same discussion. How can we, can we have money to send out our newsletter, or to print our newsletter, or to deliver in high rises our newsletter, etc. This is a long list of discussion. By the way, on Wilson and George Mason, we know this intersection very, very well.
Oh, okay.
From all points of view, because it's also an intersection that's important for cyclists, etc. There are technical issues. I always understand that the language, I'm very happy that you mentioned the language. We never managed as a government here to answer in a language that is really talking to people. It's a very, kind of framed and often ineffective. Sometimes it conveys the right thing, but in the wrong way.
Sure.
So there is a lot of discussion on how to improve on this. Other governments, what they do is they have a huge infrastructure of explanatory things and say, oh, we have a video for that, and here is how we rank intersections. Yeah, that's another thing of investment. And so, budget sessions come up, and this has not always been our strongest.
Sure, but pairing that with what I said to you guys at the Civic Association, send us an email, Takas and me on one phone call to figure out who should own this and work it to ground, because that's what I tried to tell you, and I think JD's comments were relevant. If it is in the ether and someone generally is going to do it, it ain't getting done. But send us one email, the three of us on one call, and we'll figure out what the status of, and we'll own it, because I have not followed up. You were there, I was open door Monday, and there's a lot of things competing for our time, but we need to punch through and have an accountability type session. Let's turn to you guys, if it's okay, to summarize your things together, and then if that's willing, and we'll still have these two answer all questions and fix all things, if that's all right.
All right, well, this bucket of issues is probably the most contentious of all. And I'll take a moment to say thank you very much to all of you for all the time that you put into serving this county. County accountability is confounded by a crisis of political legitimacy. Critical changes to our decades-old comprehensive plan, which would dramatically curtail citizens' control over their own neighborhoods, are being made by representatives elected from a 15% turnout of the electorate. Our at-large board represents everyone and therefore no one. Layers of studies, staff open houses, and online polls, which weigh responses by arbitrary categories like race, generation, and the type of residence somebody owns, further insulate the community from the board and serve to amplify the influence of national NGOs on Arlington decision-making. The board should be accessible only to the citizenry. Citizens should be able to talk directly to representatives who live in and love our neighborhoods.
That was a political statement, and the question is?
It is a statement of frustration, really. We're seeing the comprehensive plan proceed, and the comprehensive plan is a vehicle for densification of the county, but we're seeing the reform of government being kicked down the road.
Oh, so, okay, I understand. Thank you.
I can jump in, and I may need some help from my colleagues, but I would say thank you. Thank you for sharing the frustration. Back to the engagement question, I think we have a national crisis of engagement in government, and Arlington used to be wildly different, and we are still different, but we are losing engagement over time. And so regardless of how we structure the board or structure the county government, ensuring that we're doing civic education, that we're inviting people in, that we're getting conversations across different groups of people in the county is really, really important. And it's why CivFed has always been really important and remains pretty important today, because you can't do that just centrally. It has to happen point to point as well. On the comp plan, I think we addressed it. We hear the anxiety. We are going very slow on that. If we go at all, we will stop at phase one. We may or may not do anything with what the staff bring to us, but it will be all out in the open. We'll have those conversations. If there is a phase two, That will be clear what the scope is and where we're going and how to continue to give feedback. I think one of the issues you raised is one that we talked a lot about with several civic associations on Monday last week when Donaldson Run hosted and we did talk about comp plan in particular. One of the tensions here is an effort as a community and a board and a staff to think about what it means to engage everyone and to engage, equitably, right? And so this may be part of what you're sensing. And again, the comp plan was a really good example of it. Was we structured it to try to include not just the people who often show up, although please them as well, but to broaden the aperture a little bit. And initially, the way I received that and the way I think some others in this room may have received it was, are we closing off the people who previously had a voice in favor of having different voices? And I think it's important for us, and we talked a lot about it, that it felt that way, even if it wasn't intended that way. And so we had done these focus groups in the spring as like pre-work, intending to say there are folks who don't feel invited or we don't usually see. So how do we do the pre-work so that they feel invited? And that's what the focus groups were. But naturally, in the absence of clear information and communication, people filled in the blanks, right? And so those of us who are often at the table may have felt excluded a little bit. So, we're still new at this as a society, frankly. We have certain principles of what we're trying to do. We're trying to articulate them. But when it's not landing well, we need you to share that, and then to share like, oh, that's what you were trying to do. Well, it did not feel that way, right? I mean, this is a classic family dynamic as well. So I will leave it at that, but I hear you. I think continue to give that feedback and continue to push us to try to explain what we are doing and why, and then to evaluate whether it's working or not.
Just as a footnote to that, hearing the frustration, and there are always different opinions on things and how plans should be, what the goal of the theory of change should be, etc. I mean, it would be frightening if we were all of the same opinion on that. We are going to have a very dynamic conversation. The comprehensive plan de facto has changed every time we update one of these elements. I mean, 9 out of 12 elements have been changed even recently. It's kind of counterintuitive if the background, the connective tissue to this is not challenged against the updates that we've already done. So it has to be somehow brought into consistency. And it's actually an extra exercise in democracy here to go back and ask, okay, so does this rhyme? Is that, how you see your community today? And it's really, remember that the mandatory is every 5 years. I mean, we took a lot of time to actually update that. And the comprehensive plan is always a moment in time. The way we see ourselves, our region, the population, the dynamic balance of powers, of demographics, etc. Different people have different, and this is a small place, less than 20 square miles actually, if you take away the federal land. With huge concentration in corridors and less so around. So we need to have a system to manage change.
I mean, I think Sure.
I think the mandate is to review every 5 years, not to change every 5 years.
Correct, but we didn't do the review. But we changed the elements of the plan relatively often.
Yeah, I think for my part, the other 2 board members are leads on comprehensive plan. The quote social compact that was made 50 years ago, I do not think that should apply anymore. I think the world has changed. And that was not said earlier, but I'll say it. Because that said secure neighborhoods. I don't like the phrase secure neighborhoods. Safe, I like. Secure is about fear of others, in my view, that word. That is in our mission statement. statement. It says safe and secure neighborhoods. I think that is code word for I'm afraid of people who don't look like me. Second, this is my opinion, because I want to at least try and answer the questions. As you know, because I was the Civic Association on the form of government, I'm supportive of moving forward. I stand by. I think it was entirely the right decision for us to move that to after the budget talk, but I'm in favor of having that discussion. But on the comprehensive plan, even I'm not as informed in the day-to-day, but I think there will be language that shifts where we are to a more modern sense of planning. And I don't know how to balance the importance of civility with honestly answering the statement that you made, because I feel a responsibility to sort of share with you a little bit of where I am. I'm not sure about phase 2, but phase 1, we've got to have some language that reflects that we are now way wealthier as a full county than we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And there was a period of a decade or more where the only people who elected anyone to the county board were in a caucus of the Democratic Party. And I went to the Iowa caucus. That time is over. No more caucuses. We should have primaries. We should have more people deciding. We could do a fine-grained analysis to figure it out. But that's 9 opinions. I asked for grace, but on the flip side, I hope you tolerate my honest answers, because I think we owe you clarity on where we are on some of those. The comp plan may not rewrite the whole thing, but I do think there's going to be some language and some in there that is going to differ the tectonics of where we have been, and I'm supportive of moving forward, at least in some regard, with those pieces. But I've talked, the 2 leads are over here. I believe in civility. I don't believe in bowling alone. I believe in equity and civility, and I think it is a fair assessment that was written within the past 2 years. The history of our civic participation in voting has been that the neighborhoods have outnumbered the corridors. That is no longer entirely the case. And so we have a different politics, but I believe because of that. So I asked for grace from 4 colleagues. It's late. I want you to get the last word, and then I want to make sure John does, and then I want to get out of here before it's midnight. Oh, we'll give, for sure, you want to go now? Go.
Let's go ahead and let them finish now. I'll do it.
But make sure you fit in. Get in there. And then you too, Sue. Sorry.
Hi. Nice to see you all. Appreciate you doing this. This is the 2nd annual of these now. The county auditor, exciting leadership. There are almost as many board commissions as there are civic associations in the county. They do cover the waterfront. Both of these entities seem to be full of positive potential. Their activities can touch virtually everything we've talked about this evening. I just was wondering, individually, collectively, do you have any thoughts about how the auditor and the commissions, either with a change in resources, change in process, other facets, could help you better in your jobs?
Let's give it to the first of the 2, and then make sure we get JD in. Do you want to go first?
I think that we have been maturing and we did that in full transparency, because the auditor is, visible and accessible to everybody, and even more. It was a very good idea to start this function, to fine-tune it, to go through, a learning on how to implement that. And right now we see the fruit of this effort, which is a community effort in general. To me, the auditor is an amazing partner and a companion, helps me understand things, see things differently, channel also commissioner input, etc. I would never, the whole point of being an auditor here is to be independent. That means to have the latitude and the space to call a spade as the auditor sees that. So, and this is what is right now the case. So this is extremely helpful, not only to the board, but it's also helpful to the departments and to the manager and to everybody else. So this is a very helpful function. Just as a reminder, we have two auditing functions. We have the internal auditor, which is the accounting auditor. Basically, if you spend something on a purchase card, this is where it's registered and periodically checked, etc., whether a program is properly paid for, or where fraud and abuse, etc., are worked on. And then there is the performance auditor, which is the inspector general, basically the auditor that responds to the county board. And this is a higher level assessment. Is the board or the community getting the results that they said they want to get? Are the proper controls there? Is the general management of a department, of a program, of a deliverable transparently, properly documented, and how do we know that? And do we test that, for example? So a great example will be, when did we say, in March? When we have release a more complex audit, which is on community benefits. But we have seen that on overtime. We've seen that on the STAR system, et cetera. So there are a lot of things that we're learning from that. Great additional part is that we offer you also, the community as a whole, the civic associations, a place where to learn a little bit from a different source. So to see, for example, community benefits are accounted for this way. Interesting. I will talk with my neighbor, who is also a planning commissioner or maybe a housing commissioner, whether we can improve on this, whether, next time something comes before them, we should be looking at that, or the way we, account. Tomorrow we may review the stormwater fees program, so that may result into improvements from this interaction. This is the French call it engrenage, right? Things that are cogs that work together.
Sand is moving through this. Is there focus? I'm getting older.
I would just say thank you for the question. I think it's a great question and one that we need to continue to think a little bit more about, and would encourage you to bring forward suggestions of how we can use that help more effectively. I think we are in a moment where, between changes in kind of work structure and family structure, COVID and technology, that we're trying to figure it out. How do we modernize the commissions and the civic associations, frankly, so that they are accessible and meet the need of today? We're not throwing them out. Like, it's definitely, there's some there, and but we are working through how to, convert the deep engagement of some in the community into deep questioning and, trust but verify kind of activity, and then flip it back to, and how do you amplify and then engage a much broader community? And so you see our teams trying things. We're not getting it all perfectly right. Commissions do grow over time, like any bureaucracy, and they have grown over time despite previous boards' efforts. So at some point, we need to rationalize them again. It may be part of the, the board structure and the conversation about how are we doing as a government today. And back to your question about form of government, we are stepping into some of the conversation that the Tiger Report raised, and we are doing so in as transparent a way as possible. So in December, we laid out a 7-month effort that is underway, and Mr. Spain and I are the liaisons for it. You will get regular updates on how that's going, and at the end of that, we hope to have a little bit more of a sense of how do people think we're doing. We're doing our statistically valid survey that we do every 3 to 4 years. That just hit the street today, and then we need to sit with that. Could the commissions do more? Could the commissions do different? Do we need a different number of board members, a different number of staff? Do we need a better mission statement? Who knows? But how are we doing? What do today's people expect? and then how do we engineer it for the best success going forward. It's going to be a continually evolving effort, but it's important to stop and think about it intentionally, which is what we're doing this year.
Great, thank you. Susan, I know there's an audit piece, and I want
Okay, go
JD,
ahead.
you got another. I guess I would just say that what I heard is that also there's a desire in our conversations, and the audit leads can amplify or nod their heads or disagree, to infuse the auditor into going more to some of the commissions so that we have better engagement. And I'm hoping not to have stolen your point, but because you're the lead on that, but I at least wanted to name it, and over to you, and then we'll go to JD and you guys to conclude.
Yeah, so I do think that there's already been, with kind of, now that Wayne and Shirley have been in place, and I will say to anyone, I think Wayne is one of the best decisions that this board has made. He is a fantastic addition to this county, and the work that he has done is kind of incomparable across what this audit function has previously been. And so now that he has been able to settle, build out his job, his mindset, he is interacting with our commissions a bit more. So as we present on, for example, he did the IT infrastructure, enterprise infrastructure audit, and then he went to ITAC to present to them what he found in the area that is directly related to the commission. And so there is kind of hopefully this virtuous cycle that will begin from that, because as he gets feedback from the commissions, it can then also help inform future audit work plans, which can bring him back in front of them and so on. And so I think that's really important. I also think that to Susan's points, be on the lookout for the Commission on Commissions someday, because I do think that we are at a point where the commissions and advisory groups have really proliferated, and there's a lot of them, and some of them are doing a ton, and some of them it's unclear, and what are we doing, and what do they want to be doing, and how much effort, staff time, board member time, community time is going into groups that are not serving us as well, and is there a better way? Like, I think that it is certainly an interest of mine that we embark on that conversation, and I know it's hard because people have seats on commissions and visions and dreams and hopes and everything, and I think that's another one where we will move slowly and try not to scare anyone with fast movements, but it's a conversation that has to happen and really probably should have happened already.
So just keeping in mind, over to you, JD. I want you to get the full time to respond, because I think maybe Jeremiah, I don't know whether it's John, but you may have been the topic you wanted to share your truth. Go for it.
Yep. So I'll try to keep it brief. You asked the question pointedly about the auditor working closely with the commissions, and I won't repeat what Chair Cunningham and the Vice Chair has stated. Just to say that I'm aligned with their frame of thinking, and that we definitely, in the time is about right for us to reimagine our commissions, whether that's how much auditors work alongside them, but also with their charters, if they're really effective, right? And if we're getting our bang for the buck, I should say. And so that's going to take up a lot of bandwidth at some point in time. But I can attest, and like my colleagues can, with all of us being liaisons to a lot of these commissions and boards, that too in and of itself takes up a good bit of time to manage effectively and ensure that they are doing the work that is in keeping with the direction of the county board. But I also want to be very clear that I'm aligning my thoughts with our chair as it relates, Mr. Howard, with some of your concerns, which were accountability, at-large representation, accessibility to board. I'm kind of known as a social butterfly, so you can more than welcome to meet with me anytime. My doors are always open, and I think my colleagues are as well. But I, grew up in the South, and I know that if you don't put fertilizer or water to a young tree, it will never grow. What I'm getting at is, in Arlington, we have grown. We have been nurtured. But we also have to think about, Kate, how we communicate to this new electorate, how we engage them even in the political enterprise of civic engagement. How do we get them to turn out, Mr. Howard, and participate in a primary? That's bigger than the county board. I think that's when our community stakeholders and civic federations and organizations can really help us out. So we get folks, right, who come from all parts of our community involved in this process. I'll be the first to tell you that getting to this place where I'm at today was not given to me. You have to work north side, south side, east, west, and central Arlington. No one's going to arrive on this seat simply because they have a D by their name. It requires some hard work. And you have to know this county a little bit. So I think those are a lot of conversations we need to have. You know, whether we expand the board down the road at some point in time, will that really, yield the results that we may be looking for? I don't know. But I will tell you that the dynamics and the demographics of our community are rapidly changing. And the thoughts that went into how our community looks today or back then are sharply different now. So we should expect different outcomes in some of our analysis based on who's providing the input. And that's a testament to what just happened with the comp plan. When you go in and you build a diverse input base, you're going to get different outcomes and recommendations than what you may have gotten in the past. So I commend Susan and our vice chair for doing that hard work, because it was not easy, but it's still a lot of work to do to reach everyone in our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, JD. And
Mr. Chair,
yes,
just a little footnote. I don't want to leave the impression that while we are really thinking about improving the function of our commissions and of our other public engagement areas, I have to say I really appreciate the work and the input of every single commissioner. That is an enormous amount of expertise, time, talent that was given not only to us as an advisory, in our advisory capacity, but everything else. Arlingtonians have been very generous with this government here over many, many, many years. So I just don't want to send the wrong message that we somehow we're over that, and this is somehow obsolete. All of the contrary. We are looking into improving and enhancing that, not actually dispensing with that. So that's with a function. But in what form and how more effective it can be, and more accountable and transparent and more effective and more efficient. That's a good question. That's a good discussion to have.
thank you, Mr. Karantonis. You say footnotes sometimes, and then you deliver these big points. And so I'm going to argue with you about, or you also say, by the way, and I'm always like, and I'm like, there's actually more than a footnote there. But Mr. Howard.
Yeah, I want to go home to my wife and not to a letter from my wife's attorney, but
Me too.
I think the problems we have with regard to engagement and communication and the fundamental problem of voter turnout could be resolved with people from the neighborhoods representing the neighborhoods. That's it.
Fair, and I think it's important that we give the last word, even as there are probably 10 different takes on that. But is there anything you wanted to say, Nick, to close?
Actually, I wanted to say something.
Sure.
I wanted to hand the panel back to Nick. I think we helped to get everything back on track now, so you're welcome.
Except the timing. Yes, go ahead.
All right. I just want to thank the board. It was a pretty fruitful discussion. We covered a lot of ground tonight, and I think a lot of the passion showed, and the variety of issues, and the way we kept circling back to them. So I want to thank you for your openness. I want to thank you for your frankness. It was really helpful. It was a great conversation. I also want to thank the staff. I want to thank Mason and David and Jonathan everything that they did to make this happen and everything they will do to make sure that we follow up and we keep this work going. That's an important part of keeping this conversation going, because it's not just once a year that we get together and sit around the table. I think it's an ongoing conversation, and there's a lot to go on. And I think the other part is we need to broaden the conversation. It shouldn't be just the 500 people JD talks about. We need to make sure that we find a way to get out there, and it's the kind of things that Kate's doing, and you know, talking to people who are out there chopping ice and trying to figure out what's bugging them. Exactly. So I think it's important, the work that everyone's doing in the civic associations and all of our member delegates as well. So I just want to thank you so much, and it was a great evening.
Thank you, Nick, and particularly lots of pieces well said. Thank you in particular to Mason and Jonathan and David, as well as to colleagues and to each of you. It continues to be true that each of us gets the opportunity to work for you and all of our neighbors here, and I don't think any of us on this board take lightly that opportunity to try to serve you. So thank you for a good evening. We'll continue the conversations. Let's get home and not have a letter waiting for us.